He wasn't trying to beat the system. He was trying to prove it was already broken. Stay with this story because the most dangerous failures are rarely dramatic at first. They look like routine emails, rejected appeals, and quiet decisions nobody thinks to question. By the time Maya noticed the pattern, the education platform had already become invisible infrastructure. Schools trusted it, parents depended on it, and students adjusted their lives around its silent judgments. It handled online exams, identity checks, classroom analytics, misconduct flags, and academic integrity reports. To administrators, it promised efficiency. To students, it felt like a machine with no face. The company behind it was valued in the billions, with glossy claims about fairness, scale, and consistency. Its tools were sold as solutions to cheating, staffing shortages, and administrative overload. That was the pitch. Less bias, faster decisions, fewer human mistakes. One platform capable of watching millions of students while keeping institutions protected from risk. But beneath the confidence was a dangerous assumption that systems designed to detect problems were also good at understanding people. Maya was not a hacker, a whistleblower, or a professional investigator. She was a university student juggling classes, part-time work, and the growing unease that something around her was off. The first sign came from a classmate named Jordan, who received a notice after a remote exam. The message said unusual behavior had been detected and his score was under review. Jordan insisted he had done nothing wrong. His room was noisy because siblings were home. His camera froze twice, and he glanced away while trying to remember a formula. 3 days later, the score was voided. His appeal was denied with almost no explanation. The decision delayed a scholarship review and placed a mark against his academic record. Maya had heard students complain before. Everyone had. But Jordan's case landed differently because she had watched him prepare for that exam for weeks. Then another classmate mentioned a similar notice. Then another. Different classes, different devices, different backgrounds, but oddly similar language from the system and oddly similar appeal outcomes. At first, Maya assumed this was coincidence. Universities produce paperwork the way storms produce puddles. Still, the wording in those notices felt copied, polished, and strangely empty. She began asking gentle questions, never leading, never promising answers. What happened during the exam? What did support say? Did anyone explain which behavior triggered the concern? The answers created a foggy outline. Students with unstable internet, crowded rooms, older webcams, darker lighting, or language processing delays were appearing in these stories again and again. None of that proved anything. Maya knew that. A collection of anecdotes is not evidence. But patterns often begin as stories people dismiss because no one has collected them properly. So she started collecting them properly, patiently turning scattered complaints into a private record designed to reveal whether the same invisible logic kept appearing beneath different student stories. She built a private spreadsheet, stripped out names, and logged only details students agreed to share. Exam date, issue type, appeal status, device problems, and consequences after the flag. She kept copies of policy pages and campus instructions. She saved screenshots of support responses students had received. She compared the language institutions used with what actually happened afterward. This was not glamorous work. It was slow, careful, repetitive, and frankly boring in the way serious investigations often are before they become impossible to ignore. Still, something kept nagging at her. If the platform was only advising schools, why did so many administrators respond as though the software had already decided the student's fate? Maya spent nights reading procurement summaries, student handbooks, and archived policy updates. Most students never opened those documents unless forced. Maya began reading them like crime scene notes. One sentence appeared in different forms across multiple schools. Automated integrity reports would support human decision-making. That sounded reassuring. It also raised a very important question. That question became the hinge of the whole investigation. Where, exactly, was the human part supposed to begin? And where had software quietly started carrying more weight than anyone admitted? She spoke with teaching assistants, then faculty members willing to answer off the record. Some said review panels existed. Others admitted they only saw a risk label and a recommendation. One instructor described the dashboard as intimidating. A high-risk score arrived with video clips, timestamps, and machine-generated language that made hesitation feel irresponsible. That mattered. Even when humans technically remained in the loop, The presentation of information could pressure them toward one conclusion before they had independently evaluated anything. Maya was beginning to see the system's first real weakness. It was not simply detecting behavior, it was shaping belief. Behind every clean interface was a chain of assumptions. Looking away might mean cheating. Background voices might imply coaching. Camera glitches might suggest evasion. Silence meant normal. Motion meant suspicion. In real life, those assumptions collided with ordinary student conditions: small apartments, family caregiving, cheap laptops, shared bedrooms, bad broadband, anxiety, disability accommodations that software did not always read gracefully. To a person, context changes everything. To a badly designed process, context can arrive too late, after a label has already hardened into judgment. That was the system Maya wanted to understand. Not just the software, but the pipeline around it. Detection, escalation, review, punishment, appeal, and institutional cover. She made a rule for herself early. No intrusion, no deception, no accessing anything private. If this story mattered, it had to stand on public documents and voluntary testimony. That rule slowed her down, but it also protected the integrity of the work. She was not trying to expose a loophole by exploiting one. She was trying to document harm responsibly. Over weeks, the spreadsheet grew. 20 cases became 40, 40 became 80. The trend was no longer easy to shrug off, especially when the same clusters kept returning. Students who reported technical instability faced longer appeal delays. Students who lacked clear video footage often received vague explanations. Students who requested detail were told the process was proprietary. That word, proprietary, irritated Maya more than she expected. It sounded neutral. In practice, it meant students could be judged by a system they were not allowed to meaningfully question. She heard from a nursing student who nearly lost a placement. A first-generation student whose parents cried after a scholarship was held. An international student is terrified that a misconduct record might affect visa status. The stakes were no longer theoretical. This was not about inconvenience. It was about academic futures being redirected by a process built to move faster than its accountability. Maya also discovered something less obvious. Schools were relying on the platform because they were overwhelmed, not necessarily because they wanted harsher discipline. Faculty were buried in grading. Departments were under budget pressure. Administrators wanted standardized workflows. Vendors offered certainty packaged as efficiency. And certainty is seductive when institutions feel stretched thin. That made the story more complicated and more honest. There was no single cartoon villain. There was a market incentive, an institutional shortcut, and a student population absorbing the cost. By then, Maya had started drafting a formal memo. Not an angry thread, not a viral rant. A structured document written like someone expected it to be challenged line by line. She separated claims from observations. She listed patterns without overreaching. She included anonymized case summaries, policy contradictions, and questions that every institution using the tool should be able to answer. She asked how often human reviewers overturned automated flags. She asked whether appeal outcomes differed by technical issue. She asked what safeguards existed for disability, income, and living conditions. She also asked the quietest question in the document, which turned out to be the most explosive. Were institutions tracking false positives with the same seriousness as they tracked suspected cheating? That question cut straight through the public relations language. A detection system can brag about catching risk. It takes maturity to measure the innocent people it wrongly drags into suspicion. At this point, the story could have ended in a campus office. Maya could have submitted the memo, received a polite reply, and watched the machine continue humming. Instead, the university's first response raised the tension because it acknowledged the complaint without engaging the substance of what Maya had actually documented. The first reply thanked her for her concern, confirmed that existing procedures were being followed, and encouraged affected students to use formal appeals. It answered almost none of her questions. Maya read the message 3 times. What bothered her was not the refusal. It was the way the response sounded like a template designed to close the door without touching the handle. So she went back to the students. Had any appeals changed after new evidence? Has anyone received a detailed explanation? Has policy language shifted? The answer, again and again, was no. One student shared a timeline showing an appeal deadline that expired before technical logs were released. Another described being asked to defend behavior from a video clip they were not permitted to view fully. Those details transformed the story. The flaw was not merely algorithmic, it was procedural. Students were entering a maze without a map, while the institution held every flashlight. Midway through this investigation, consider subscribing if you enjoy stories about systems, power, and the moments ordinary people force institutions to explain themselves. Maya decided the memo needed outside eyes. She approached the student newspaper first, because local accountability often begins with people close enough to understand the stakes. The editor hesitated. Algorithmic fairness sounded important, but also complicated. The story needed proof, balance, and care. One weak claim could let the university dismiss the entire investigation. So Maya brought receipts, not dramatic secrets, but organized evidence, redacted communications, consistent timelines, policy text, student interviews, questions unanswered by administrators despite repeated attempts. The paper assigned a reporter. Together, they sought comments from the university, the vendor, legal aid groups, accessibility advocates, and education researchers who study automated decision systems. That is where the case began expanding beyond one campus. Experts recognized the issue immediately. Automated suspicion can become institutional pressure when safeguards are weak and transparency is optional. One researcher described it as a feedback loop. The system flags, staff trusts the flag, students struggle to challenge it, and low reversal rates are then presented as proof the system works. That sounded elegant in a research paper. In practice, it was disturbing because the loop could convert institutional convenience into apparent proof of accuracy. As publication approached, Maya felt something between pride and dread. She wanted the truth examined. She did not want classmates dragged into spectacle or faculty painted as monsters. She insisted that every student account be anonymized unless permission was explicit. She pushed back against sensational language. The story had to be strong because it was fair, not because it was loud. The article went live on a rainy Wednesday morning, quietly at first, then with the strange speed stories gain when readers recognized themselves inside them. Within hours, students from other departments wrote in with similar experiences. By evening, alumni had shared old appeal stories. By the next day, a regional education reporter requested an interview. Then came the university's public statement. It said academic integrity remained essential. The institution valued fairness, and all concerns would be reviewed through appropriate channels. To most readers, the statement sounded reasonable. To Maya, it sounded familiar, the same polished fog, now released at a larger scale. But the story had crossed the invisible threshold institutions fear most. It was no longer a collection of isolated complaints. It was a public question with names, policies, and financial stakes attached. A week later, an external student advocacy organization published a brief referencing the investigation. They called for clearer disclosures, independent audits, and meaningful student access to evidence used against them. That was the twist Maya had not expected. Her work did not prove a single secret conspiracy. It exposed something more ordinary and more unsettling, a system nobody had fully stress-tested against real human variation. The platform had been optimized for scales, speed, and risk reduction. But fairness had been treated like a promise in marketing language rather than a measurable operational requirement. When organizations say a tool supports decisions, people assume the human operator remains fully in control. In practice, interfaces, timelines, and institutional incentives can narrow that control until it becomes ceremonial. That distinction matters far beyond education. A recommendation can feel like a verdict when it arrives dressed in data, wrapped in urgency, and backed by a vendor with technical authority. Maya's spreadsheet revealed no magic code and no hidden master switch. The flaw lived in process design, evidentiary imbalance, and a business model that rewarded adoption faster than accountability. The schools wanted fewer cheating disputes. The vendor wanted fewer manual reviews. Students wanted fair treatment. Those goals were not automatically aligned, though the platform sold them as if they were. Inside large institutions, this kind of failure hides easily. Contracts are signed by procurement teams, implemented by departments, defended by legal offices, and experienced most painfully by people with the least procedural power. Each group sees only one slice. The purchaser sees pricing. The administrator sees workflow. The professor sees flagged cases. The student sees an accusation, a deadline, and a door that barely opens. That fragmentation is useful to a weak system. No single person feels fully responsible, so no single person has enough urgency to ask whether the whole pipeline is treating people fairly. Education technology companies often sell confidence before they sell proof. Their strongest metric may be adoption, not accountability. A product can spread quickly while its harms remain statistically inconvenient to measure. False positives are especially easy to minimize when the people affected are dispersed. One student at one campus looks unlucky. 50 students across 20 schools start to resemble a product design problem. Maya's work gave shape to that invisible middle. She was not claiming every flagged case was wrong. She was showing that the process lacked credible ways to distinguish genuine misconduct from ordinary human complexity. That distinction changed the tone of the debate. The question was no longer whether schools should protect integrity. Of course they should. The question was whether integrity meant punishing uncertainty by default. And once that question was public, defending the old process became harder. Silence now looked less like caution and more like a choice to preserve convenience over clarity. Under pressure, the university announced a temporary review of automated flag procedures. It paused certain misconduct escalations tied to technical anomalies and invited previously affected students to request case reconsideration. For Jordan, the classmate whose case first caught Maya's attention, the update came too late to erase the stress. But his record was eventually corrected, and his scholarship review resumed. Other students were not as fortunate. Some decisions had already shaped course progression, internship timing, or financial aid. System repairs rarely travel backward at the speed as harm. The vendor released its own response, saying it welcomed dialogue, supported institutional partners, and continued improving reliability. It also emphasized that final decisions belonged to schools, not software. That statement was technically important. It was also incomplete. Responsibility can be distributed across institutions without becoming invisible. Someone must own what happens when process design predictably harms people. Maya understood that, and so did the readers who stayed with the story. The system had not failed because no one cared. It failed because everyone cared about a different part of the outcome. Procurement cared about cost. Administration cared about consistency. The faculty cared about cheating. Vendors cared about scale. Students cared about being believed before being punished. When those priorities collide, the least powerful group usually pays first because they carry the consequences without controlling the dashboards, contracts, or public statements. The review widened. Faculty Senate committees requested more information. The student government demanded policy language that distinguished machine-generated concern from verified misconduct. Disability offices asked for stronger pre-exam accommodations. Privacy advocates raised another issue. Students had normalized constant surveillance because education framed it as a temporary necessity. But temporary systems often stick around once budgets and workflows adapt to them. The conversation moved from one platform to a broader question. How much invisible judgment should students accept in exchange for convenience? And who gets to challenge that judgment effectively? Maya was invited to speak at a campus forum. She declined the first time, then accepted the second. Public speaking terrified her more than data ever had. On stage, she did not posture as a hero. She described the process, the uncertainty, and the students who had trusted her with painful stories. She said fairness must be built into procedures, not promised afterward. Her strongest line was simple. If a system can accuse a student at scale, it should also be able to explain itself at scale. The room went quiet after that, not because everyone agreed, but because the sentence stripped away every comforting excuse and left the core issue exposed. In the months that followed, the university changed parts of its review procedure. Students received clearer notices, longer appeal windows in technical cases, and more direct access to the evidence informing allegations. It also created a faculty-student oversight group to monitor recurring issues. The group could not fix every problem, but it gave affected people a route other than shouting into a blank support portal. Other institutions began reviewing their own practices. Some found they had stronger safeguards already. Others discovered they had relied too heavily on defaults supplied by vendors and never questioned. That is how system failures spread, not always through malice, but through copy-paste governance. One campus accepts a workflow, another inherits it. Soon, convenience became standard practice. The billion-dollar education system did not collapse after Maya's investigation. It was adjusted. And that may be the most realistic ending of all. Large systems rarely shatter when challenged. They bend, issue statements, rewrite outcry policies, and protect their legitimacy. Real change happens when outside pressure keeps forcing those adjustments to become substantive. Maya returned to classes after the public storm, but she was different. She had learned that complexity often protects power because most people are too busy to untangle it. She had also learned that evidence does not need to be dramatic to matter. A carefully organized pattern can be more dangerous to a flawed system than one explosive allegation. The legacy of her work lived in policy revisions, public skepticism, and a new question students began asking before accepting automated judgment. What process exists if the tool gets it wrong? That question is bigger than exams. It applies to hiring, lending, healthcare, policing, and every sector where software quietly influences opportunities while humans pretend they remain fully in charge. The lesson is not that technology is bad. That would be lazy. The lesson is that high-impact technology deserves higher standards of proof, transparency, and appeal. A system built to detect risk should also detect its own mistakes. A school defending integrity should defend due process with equal intensity. Otherwise, efficiency becomes a polite name for damage. Maya did not expose the platform by breaking into it. She exposed it by paying attention, documenting carefully, and refusing to accept that confusion was the same thing as fairness. That distinction matters. Responsible scrutiny is not sabotage. Asking how power works is not disloyalty. Sometimes it is the only reason institutions improve before more people are hurt. And perhaps that is the most uncomfortable part of the story. The flaw was visible from the start, just scattered across enough inboxes, hearings, and rejected appeals that nobody saw the full picture. Until one student decided to connect the dots and show that systems often look strongest precisely where they have gone the longest without meaningful scrutiny. If this story made you rethink how automated systems shape education, share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more case studies on power, technology, and the lessons institutions learn too late.